and for this community. Uh, I had the honor and privilege of participating in LEAD. I think I was part of the second cohort, and what I learned there has definitely carried me through into my career. So if you haven't already, I think LEAD applications have either opened or about to open, and I would recommend you check it out. One of my favorite things to do is to go in and speak to the current LEAD cohort. It's so fun to meet everybody and make those great community connections.
You know what
Well,
lead is?
today we're going to be talking about inclusive storytelling for nonprofits. And before we get started, I did want to just go over some community guidelines and introduce a few ways of how we're going to be interacting with each other in the space today. So inclusive storytelling does touch on issues of equity, inclusion, social injustices, and that can bring up some lived experience triggers, or it can be something that may be a little bit difficult to talk about, or people feel like they can't fully be themselves or open. So I want to say that this is a space where we really encourage us to set aside those hesitancies and hopefully be able to engage in open and honest and transparent dialogue. So in order to do that, these guidelines are here so that we can manage how we comport ourselves in this space. It's not so much a policing thing; it's more of a here's how I'm agreeing to show up and enter into today. So firstly, let's listen and seek first to understand. There's a variety and diversity of perspectives and lived experiences and journeys that are bringing us together into the room today. Secondly, let's own our intentions and our impacts. Sometimes people hear the same words in very different ways. And again, that's because we have different lived experiences, right? So if something's unclear, let's just be comfortable asking that. And let's honor today's conversations as being confidential. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want you to share about what you heard or learned or read. But if someone shares something about an organization or something that they're learning or they're processing, let's respect that person's anonymity and say, rather than saying Sheila told me that she works with organization ABC and that they're having trouble with fund development, we can say something like a participant, expressed that there were some concerns in some organizations around fund development, right? So we can still share it out, but let's also just respect what's shared in this space. And something else that comes up into entering as we're learning new things or practicing new ways of doing things is to stay present and curious. If something's unclear, you have a question, just ask. It's a learning opportunity. And it may seem like other people have the same baseline, but maybe they don't. And we will never know unless someone asks. So if you're feeling up for it, be the brave soul and raise your hand. And then also, this is a space where we lift each other up, right? We're here to help each other grow. We're here to help each other expand and to practice new skills. And it always takes a little bit of learning. I mean, when I think about it, no one started walking or running on their first step, right? We all had to fall down a whole bunch of times and make mistakes and get back up and try again. And this is a similar experience to that. And then lastly, let's ask our questions respectfully. There's no need to pass judgment, or let's watch our language when we ask our questions so that we can have an open conversation. So that's what I got as suggestions for today's talk. Anyone else have any other suggestions or things that they want to add or things that they found as best practices? Give it a couple minutes. Feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand. Any of those work. Okay, we just got a comment thanking people for asking for pronouns at the top. So hearing no other suggestions, I'm going to move us along in the interest of time. Also, if you get dropped from the call for whatever reason, or you need tech support, we can please feel free to reach out to either me or Reed. You should have Reed's email, and we can get you back online or see what's happening and going on. And with that being said, Reed, I almost forgot, but luckily I made a note. We need to take a picture just to capture this day. So I think we have how many? We have 34 participants. Is everyone going to be able to fit into one picture, or do you have any suggestions or recommendations as to how we can get everybody in? Susie, chime in too if you have an idea.
Yeah, I think whoever's able to be on camera, great. If not, we'll just whoever, I think Amanda's on the call, maybe she can just take a screenshot.
Okay, great. So Amanda, can you, I'll ask people if you can, please turn your cameras on so we can see everyone. And then Amanda, let us know when, maybe do a cheese or inclusive storytelling smile kind of thing, and
We've got
take a
about
screenshot and let us know when it's done.
half the group, and
Okay.
I might need two screens. So if you're not on camera, we invite you just to join on momentarily.
Mhm.
And almost there, bottom row. All right, let's go. A one, two, three. And then I will try, let me just save that so I don't lose my snip. And then we will take, let me see if there's another screen of people. Hold on. Yeah, one more screen. And one, two, three. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Now we can back to business as usual. Um, all right, so moving on, here is what we're learning about today. Our goals are to have you practice storytelling techniques in real time that you can take back to your organization first and foremost. We also want you to start thinking critically about how you craft your story and maybe analyzing stories you already have written or stories you're about to write, and provide you with the tools, processes, and resources to do such. And then we also want to take some time to reflect about through this process about what is special about our community, right? What are our special community needs? What are the power dynamics that we have in our community and some opportunities that we might have for growth around that? So we'll be looking at that. Any questions about the learning goals? Any clarification needed here? Oh, okay, I'll move us right along then. So today's topics. First, we're going to start with why inclusive storytelling is important. And then we're going to talk about how we can center those that we serve in our respective organizations into our inclusive storytelling practices. And then we're going to have some breakouts and give you time to practice inclusive storytelling and share with others. And we'll go from there. We'll have a small group discussion, and that'll be the day. And of course, please know this is an ongoing conversation. So if you have questions at the end of this, if you come away wanting more information or more resources, it's always an open door, and you can always circle back and send us an email or ask us questions about whatever it is that stuck out to you. This isn't just a one and done, so I just want to make sure that you knew that. So, importance of inclusive storytelling. Um, I'm going to use an experience. I went through an inclusive storytelling transformation, if you will, with a local organization. Again, calling forth the confidential nature of these discussions. It's an organization called Santa Cruz Community Ventures. I was hired as their fund development director, and this was right before COVID. I want to say it was like 2018, 19. And I'm going to use a lot of the experiences from that organization to illustrate some of the concepts that we talk about today. But I want to just first and foremost say that that experience of switching into more of an inclusive storytelling module was very transformational. It shifted the perception of the organization, not just in terms of the people that work there, but also in terms of the clientele that we served. And it really was like a catalyst changing moment for the organization. So this is what we're talking about today is some very powerful stuff. It's stuff that can have broad ranging impacts and ramifications. In addition, inclusive storytelling help support clear organizational mission and vision and connect those two together. And it can really set you apart in your language, in your proposals, and in how you think about things. So for example, in communications, we have these things called boilerplates, and some people might know them as other things, but just that standard paragraph that you see at the end of every press release about an organization or an agency and what they do and what their mission is and who they serve. So this certainly impacts those statements that are sent out broadly about your organization. But with ventures, one of the things that this process did is that, of course, as I was saying, this happened in about 1819, and then COVID hit in 2020, and we couldn't no longer get together. And this was right as we were kind of starting to gel around our inclusive language. And we wanted to share with funders and others in the community how we were different and what we were doing. And because we had already gone through that process, we were able to come up with an idea of doing a virtual open house. So we just invited some of our vendors to come in and meet with us virtually. And we shared stories from the perspective of the newly revised values that we had. And I kid you not, right after that open house, we had 2 or 3 funders ask us for follow-up meetings, saying that they wanted to learn more, that they wanted to be more engaged, or saying that they felt more connected to our organization because of the language we used and because of the stories that we told. So, for example, we made sure that all staff members that were presenting had a story to tell about themselves and their connection to ventures and their connection to the work, because we know that nonprofit work is often work of the heart, right? You do it because you love it. It goes beyond just a paycheck. It goes to your values. It goes to the social change that you want to be. So we activated that and said, have a story ready. And as you introduce yourself, tell that story. And then let's talk about how that connects to the work. So like I said, this is some pretty powerful stuff that can bring up some new opportunities and chances for approaching the same work in a different way. And to that end, here's an example of what that meant for ventures in terms of our mission statement. So in the first vision statement, it was said, we help activate low-income immigrant Spanish-speaking communities' economic power towards self-determination and civic engagement. That was the first mission statement when I arrived at Ventures, or something similar to that. And I want to ask, and I'm hoping, please, let's be active today so that we don't have to waste our time with long pregnant pauses before somebody answers, because I kid you not, I am super skilled at waiting you out. I am comfortable in the silence. So I'm hoping that someone will just pop up and either type something in the chat or unmute themselves. But can someone tell me, please, what do you think the mission of that organization is, if that's all you read, right? We help activate low-income immigrant Spanish-speaking communities' economic power towards self-determination and civic engagement. What does that organization do? Annie, I see your hand.
It sounds like they're lowering a hand down to lift someone up, to raise
Right.
them to their level. So it's kind of going down.
Exactly.
It's condescending.
Exactly. And you answered my second question. Was like, what do you think that says about the community that they serve? You answered all of my questions now that I look at it. Because the other question was, how do you think this organization enters into relationship with those that they serve, right? So you can see that this language, even though it's not calling it out, is very subtly and clearly communicating some very important information here. It's telling us how that organization sees their mission, how they see the people that they serve, and describes the relationship that they have with the people that they serve. Now let's take a look at the inclusive mission statement that Ventures developed afterwards. Together, we are working towards a shared prosperous future where zip code, race, gender, or immigration status do not dictate income or wealth. What stands out to you about that? I see in the chat, it's more inclusive. It's growth mindset. Thank you, Monica and Melanie, for participating. Ira says it's all inclusive. Yeah, it's definitely different, right? It doesn't single things out. It doesn't single anyone out. It's positive. It's uplifting. So I just wanted to show you these side by side so you can kind of see it's the same organization, the same work, different language. and it engages audiences very differently. And I will say this, when done effectively, inclusive storytelling is likely to result in radical organizational culture change. So just be sure that you're ready for the roller coaster that lies ahead when you commit to this practice. It's fun. And it's challenging, but it's really rewarding, and your organization will come out the better for it. And I see some more comments here in the chat that I just want to call out. So someone says, Carrie says, it's more empowering. Jenny says, it makes the work for everyone, making everyone responsible and active in community change. And Leticia says, it takes us away from the us versus them mentality. And Susie says, the first word resonates, together, right? That inclusivity. So thank you for chatting that out with me. Really appreciate that. Now we're going to talk about how we can center those that we serve, right? So when we center those that we serve, and you think about who is your clientele, who is it that you support, who is it that you walk with in community through your organization. And when you're thinking about inclusive storytelling, the things that you want to keep in mind are the role and contributions that the people that you serve make to our community and the impact that they have in our community. You also want to consider, because right, our nonprofit is there to help someone. It's there to make someone's life better. It's support and improve and add value to the quality of life in our community. And to me, that says that there's this underlying notion that inherently there's some sort of social inequity that underlies all of these problems and issues that we're trying to address. So when we're thinking about those that we serve, let's think about what are those root issues that are contributing to this problem. Let's understand them. Maybe we don't have to name them, but it's important that we're aware of them and that we know how they play into what our organization is doing, right? And then when we talk about the people that we serve, let's use asset-based language that clearly explains your organizational values and connects the dots to how you lend help and support to the segment of community that you serve. So with that being said, I guess I just use the term here and I want to check in with you all, see what you think. What's asset-based language mean? Does everybody understand that? Does everybody know what that means? Can someone share their interpretation of it? I see Brooke raise her hand.
Right. So for me, coming from a community development background, asset-based language is, the opposite of deficit or needs-based perspectives. So you look at all the strengths that the community has and start from there to get towards where you want to go together.
Right. I think that's the most common way that we understand that. And then there's different ways that we can understand assets, right? We can understand assets as physical assets. You're tall, you're strong, right? You can reach up high, you can reach down low. If you're kids, you have little hands, you can get into little nets. So there's those kinds of assets. There's intellectual assets, there's technological assets, there's knowledge-based assets, right? If I'm a gardener and someone wants to start a garden but doesn't know how, well, then that's considered an asset, or in all these ways. So it's also nice to kind of also think through the different types of assets and figure out what assets are within the community that I serve. How can I call them out for things that they've been doing well, that have been working? What are their contributions to our community? How are they making our community a better place? And how do I tell my story from that perspective? So I'm going to kind of illustrate that again with going back to the previous mission statement from Ventures. So if we look at this, we can see I've color-coded some words here because I wanted to really call out some things that you have already picked up on. So as I said, the things that we want to consider here are thinking about the role and contributions of those that we serve, considering the root causes of social inequity, and using asset-based language. And we can see those three principles reflected in both of these mission statements, but in very different ways. So in the blue writing is like the mission work, right? What the organization was actively working on. So in the previous statement, they described their work as activating economic power. Whereas in the inclusive mission statement, it's working towards a shared prosperous future. Similar, but very different language. And like I said, using the asset base, right? It's like, we're in this together. We want, everybody wants prosperity. That's an underlying thing. And we can all work together towards achieving that. And now we take a look at the reddish pinkish language, and that's how the organization describes who they serve, right? So in the previous statement, it was low income immigrant Spanish speaking. And then in the inclusive statement, it's zip code, race, gender, or immigration. And those are the descriptors of who we served. You'll notice that we didn't call out specifically or paint like that concrete picture. Rather, we painted the concrete picture by describing the characteristics of the root causes that lead to this low-income immigrant Spanish-speaking picture that's painted, right? Like the inequality, if you'll take it like the inequality that immigrant communities experience is often because of where they live, the zip code that they live in, right? Their race, their gender, or their immigration status. So we really try to tease out what are the underlying root causes that are coming into play here for these low-income immigrant Spanish-speaking communities. And rather than say poor immigrant, non-English speaking people, we seek to address the root causes, right? And then the green vision, and then the green speaks to the vision, the change that the organization wants to see. In the previous mission statement, they have it as towards self-determination and civic engagement, because the organization really wanted people to be able to feel confident in their communities and say, this is the life I want to build for myself, and go after it. Go after higher paid jobs, go after higher education, participate in city council meetings, vote if they could, open a bank account if they could, not be scared to get an ITIN number. So that's what towards self-determination and civic engagement meant. But then when we really thought about this and got back to our mission work, again, that activating economic power or working towards a prosperous future, what we realized is that what we really meant and what we really wanted to do is to give access to income and wealth to all. That's the change that we wanted to see. The getting an ITIN, the participating in civic engagement, like those are byproducts of having access to income and wealth. I know I just threw a lot at you, so I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has any questions about what I just said, if this is helpful to see it kind of side by side and color coded like this.
I just wanted to notice, Ileana, to Brooke's excellent point about you jettison that deficit language of describing a community as low income, right? As though that's kind of a permanent condition. I really like seeing that revision in the second version.
Thank you, Reed. It was a lot of work.
I love the warning, when done effectively, likely to result in radical organizational culture change. That's cool.
Okay, so I'm getting a couple comments in the chat here. Annie says, I'm surprised that the negative statement do not dictate. I think Annie, yes, the not is often seen as a negative, but I guess the opposite is in a business as usual scenario currently today, like zip code, race, gender, and immigration status do dictate income and wealth and access to economic prosperity. And we want to remove that. The easiest way to do it was just to put a not in there, right? To say we're going to challenge the status quo. We want to see things different. We also see Monica saying the color coding is helpful. Thank you, Monica. Glad you like it. And then Melanie says, interested in this practice when defining our audience to funders. Yes, I will get to that. Brooke, I see your hand is up.
I just wanted to say I really like how the inclusive statement talks about co-creating the future with the people who are participating with the organization, rather than the first one makes it seem like you said, that there are specific objectives that will be met. So I like that it's not as specific, but it's more open.
Right, and I'm glad you picked up on that, Brooke, because I think that also was another byproduct of the radical organizational change that happened in ventures during this time. We went from being service providers to solution co-creators. Now we always say, some funders might come to us and say, we want a program that teaches people how to save. How are you going to do it? Can you do it for us? And we'll say, well, what are your goals? We have to go back to the community and talk to them. Who's your target audience? We can't say what's going to be most effective for the community without first talking to the community about it, right? Like, we need to ask them what their preference is and what's going to work for them. And that's gone a long way on both ends, like both with funders in terms of being able to have often open conversations and building credibility with funders. And I think, Melanie, this is a little bit to your question or your point. And then it goes a long way with community too. So I can share a quick little story around UndocuFund. Santa Cruz Community Ventures started UndocuFund during COVID, and we had funders wanting to provide funds to support families, but they said, we only want the rent to be paid with this. We only want this to go to food, or we only want this for utilities. And ventures pushed back and said, we've talked to community. Community has said that, they have a lot of diverse needs, and we, as the organization that supports and protects them, think it's super important that they have the ultimate decision to decide where they want to expense these funds, right? Do they need rent, or do they need food, or do they need diapers, or do they need the lights on? It's not for us to say. Each family is different, and each family has their own unique needs, and each family should be able, if they receive aid, to self-determine how those funds are going to be spent. Now, what we can do is we can ask them how they intend to spend these funds, and we can collect that data and report it back to you so that you know where those funds are going. But what we cannot do is tell community how to spend those funds. This is a crisis, right? And so it really does change the type and quality and caliber of conversation that you have on both ends. Community then now trusted us that they could spend that money on whatever it is that they needed to. And then funders then trusted us to be able to ethically, inclusively, and equitably distribute funds, and that their funds would really meet community needs in the best way possible. Okay, so now I'm going to quickly cover how to craft your inclusive story. Please, again, we've talked about it a lot. Always use asset-based language, and especially think about it through your 5 W's, your who, what, when, where, and why. And the way that we can craft an inclusive story is, or the process that we used was this. First, start looking at current stories you have currently. Look at the language, just like we did in the mission statement. Take out all the loaded terms and try to use as neutral terms as you can. So maybe instead of saying uneducated, you might say low formal educational attainment. Why? Because more people can relate to neutral terms, and it naturally maintains the broadest opportunities to find allies and supporters in your work. Then step 2, check for any assumptions and opportunities. So using that low educational attainment example, you might have said low educational attainment, and then you're assuming in those words that formal school is the only way to learn. Formal diploma, traditional educational, Western style educational is the only valid way to learn. Ask yourself, is that true? Probably not. So then maybe you go back and you add in the words low formal educational attainment. Let's be very clear and specific about what we're talking about here. Not just low educational attainment, it's low formal educational attainment. Then check your opportunities. How else might someone be able to contribute this conversation, right? So, now that I know that it's low formal educational attainment, what are the informal ways that someone can know? What are the informal ways that someone can learn? It might be lived experience. It might be job experience. There are different ways of knowing, and how can then we activate the other education components around this wording, right? Then that can give you ideas on ways that you can grow your programming, or new questions to ask, or helps you get creative on new ways to approach current programs. I just want to also note that this exercise in step 2 might lead to longer language. Like, instead of just saying uneducated, you're now saying low formal educational attainment, a lot longer. But don't worry about it at this step. The goal here is to accurately and objectively describe your work, and to check for assumptions and opportunities. That's where the real gold is Then in step 3, that's when you cut back. That's when you look at every single word that you have in your story, and you keep only the essential parts, and you know why you're keeping those essential words, right? And then in step 4, discuss and share with 1 to 2 trusted colleagues. I say 1 to 2, keep it small first, especially as you're just learning, because this is where conversation can get really deep and philosophical. And trusted colleagues, because you need to be talking to people that are not afraid to engage in open dialogue, that can push back and say, why do you need the word formal there? It shouldn't be formal, and here's why, right? This is where discussion around values really comes into play. And make sure that you have the relational equity to have, yeah, open and honest conversations. It's super important. I cannot underscore that. And then go back and refine your words and refine your story. And then you start all over again. You'll look at your words, see if anything came out of that, try to neutralize it as much as possible. And, you begin the process again. And I will say too, like with writing, I think, and the evolution, just like an organization is constantly growing, inclusive storytelling is constantly changing, right? So this is an ever evolving thing. It's not going to be static. So you can never touch it too much, and you can never, you need to touch it as frequently as your organization has big shifts and priorities. So now some tips on crafting your inclusive story. As I just mentioned, this is an iterative and interactive process. You need thought partnership. You need to understand where your organization is going and why, and who they serve and why, and what change you want to make. And it helps too, before you start, to do some prep work. So for example, talk to various people, see what it is that they like about you, see what they think that they could improve, see how their quality of life is in your organization or how they experience your organization. Collect or dust off, because it doesn't have to be a big thing or anything. You can, use what you've already done before, but just look at it through a new perspective. Any kind of stories you already have and any kind of data you already have. If you need a few more data points, then do a quick survey, or go talk to more clients and get qualitative data. And then test your assumptions and identify your opportunities. As you look through your stories, look to see, like, what are we assuming about those that we serve? What are we assuming about our core values as an organization? What are we doing as given? And are there opportunities to change that? Or are there opportunities to revisit these conversations and confirm that we still want to go in this direction? Something that helped, having clear and agreed upon values ready to go. So when I was working with the executive director at Ventures and recrafting this new inclusive storytelling, during a conversation just like the one I mentioned, where we were talking about what are the root causes of economic inequity, how do we address them, how do we talk to funders about them, how do we do our work? The executive director said, look, whatever it is that we do, we have to approach it with dignity, love, and respect. And from there came all of the words, right? Does this convey dignity for ourselves, for the people that we serve, for our funders? Does this convey respect? Does this convey how much we love our community and how much we love those that we serve? Right. So having that framework, it was just 3 simple words, was super helpful in figuring out what to include and what to leave out. It was kind of a razor, if you will. And then last but not least, please check your images. This is super important, especially because when you're working with very vulnerable populations or populations that have a lot of stake in our community, it's important to be, again, treat them with dignity, love, and respect. And I'm going to use an example here that we're all pretty familiar with. It's the stereotypical, I've heard the term poverty pimping. And then we're going to talk about this just like we did with the mission statement, because the images are very, very powerful. So we have on the left, and I'm sorry for the shock value, we have on the left the typical historical help starving people in Africa, right? And here's the image associated with it. They need you, they can't feed themselves. And I guess I would ask you too, if you look at this image on the left, what does this say if an organization puts this up about the people that they serve? What comes to your mind? savior complex. Thank you, Melanie. Exactly. And not only that, but also this image is using scare tactics to get you to move, to get you involved, right? They're not getting you involved because you're committed to the organization, which means that likely as a fund, from the fund development perspective, you're not going to have this person giving you money for long periods of time. You're not going to be able to cultivate them through that fund development process. They're going to give you and then they're gone. Whereas let's look at the image on the left, I mean the right, right? It's a mother, they're both mothers with children, but in very different contexts. Iris says emotional blackmail. Yeah, yeah. Bailey says exploiting people, exploitative. Yes, exactly. This picture, the image on the left, does not treat people with dignity, respect, and love. The picture on the right, however, shows a very healthy mother, a very healthy child, and they're actively working, right? They're actively working to feed themselves. They're actively working to plant a crop. Maybe they just need a little hand up once in a while, or it's seasonal work. Maybe there's a season where they need a little hand up. And from the fund development perspective, it makes a lot more sense to say, look, these people, right, the asset-based language again, these people are putting in a lot of hard work. They're doing what they can, and it's still not enough. And we're just here to give them a helping hand. We want to see and think together about what they need to have income year round. Can you help fund that? Right? Can you help fund a space where we can get creative and come up with a solution together on how we can help this particular group of people? And then you start building relationships, right? Then you've got someone that you can cultivate, like, yeah, I'll fund this project. I'll fund that project too. I'll fund, and that's how, from the fund development perspective, you grow those donor relationships until hopefully before you know it, they're giving you meaningful gifts that really speak to a true collaboration between you and your funders for co-creating a shared future for those that you serve. That's inclusive storytelling. So now we're going to have you put it into practice. We're going to do some small group breakouts. It'll be approximately 30 minutes. And I think the groups will be about, what do you say, Reid, 3-4 people in size? As a reminder, this is in a confidential space. These breakouts will not be recorded. Before we go into breakouts, I'm going to ask that you take a couple of minutes and just look at a story that you have from your organization. It could be the mission statement, it can be how you describe those that you serve, it could be something completely different, but a story that's well known to you that you feel comfortable with about your organization. I want you to take a couple minutes and maybe practice or think about what is the language that's being used in this story? How can I transform it to be more inclusive based on what we just talked about? Not a lot of pressure, it doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, we're just learning to walk, we're taking our first step. What matters is that we go through the exercise and we try it. So we're going to do that for a couple minutes, and then in small groups you will share your story, and think about how your story has changed because of how you changed the way you thought about the story, or how you changed the language in the story. And then we'll do the same for the populations that we serve or a different story, and chat about that in small groups for, about half an hour. But first, what do you guys want? 2 minutes, 3 minutes? What feels good? To think this through and have something together. Do you want 4 minutes? I'm not hearing any preferences. So I'm making an executive decision. You guys will have 3 minutes. You can feel free to go camera off, pull out your story, think things through, and we'll see you back here in 3 minutes with breakout room. Reid, do you have the breakout rooms ready to go, or would you like me to help set that up? Or okay, they're all ready to go. Okay, so I will call you guys back in 3 minutes then. And we're all ready. Thank you, Reid.